tell us the difference between the wet laminate that you're doing and prepregs?
So this is now technically a prepreg, and the reason, so the difference between a wet lam and a prepreg is a wet laminate you'll generally put on the job and you'll apply the resin to it, whereas this is now technically a prepreg, but we don't define it as a prepreg because it's not in a frozen roll and pre-impregnated by a manufacturer, blah 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 blah. A prepreg is just a pre-impregnated fibre with resin before you start your job. So we would make our own Wetpreg, which is this, as opposed to prepreg, because prepreg used to be very expensive compared to this Wetpreg, and in particular it required a lot of high temperature cooking to get the prepreg resins to flow. The biggest difference between this Wetpreg that I'm doing now and a manufacturer's prepreg is the resin system that they use. It's still an epoxy resin, but the way that it's treated to get it to cure is completely different. So this only requires technically ambient or room temperatures to cure, whereas a manufacturer from Mitsubishi Rayon or Newport Composites or ACG or Gurit or somewhere like that requires usually a temperature in excess of 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, whereas this will cure at 10, 12 degrees, but I like to post cure it more than that to get reach the properties that's required. The advantage with prepregs is you literally have weeks of working time with the material. So you can build an entire hull shell of a boat with the fibre and the resin all in one, and you've got weeks of working time before the resin inside the prepreg starts to go off. The other advantage of it is it's like a vinyl sticker, and you can cut it very accurately to the shapes that you want. So things like patching and overlaps and things like that can be super accurate. In the Formula 1 game, they're plus and minus less than 1 millimeter. They have laser placement setups where they actually use a CNC cutter that's from the textile industry. So they'll actually CNC cut the shapes that I'm cutting now here with my hand and scissors with a plotter. They'll also mark a heap of reference points on it, and it's in the boating industry as well, because that's what I used to do a lot of at CTEC and Gurit, well, when it was high modulus back in the day, is we would cut a pattern like this. I'd number it with the layer number, put the little reference marks on it so you can line everything up exactly where it needs to be, blah 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 blah. Really cool, accurate way of building composite parts, but there's downsides, lots of downsides. One, as I said before, is it needs to be cooked at high temperatures, so your molds need to be good and stable at dealing with high temperatures. Also with reasonable pressures. You can just vacuum bag it for consolidation, but generally when you're playing with prepregs, we like to put them in autoclaves. so that we get really good consolidation on the smaller parts. With the boats still, we only do it at ambient or at 1 atmosphere vacuums. The other downside to Prepreg is it's not very sleazy.
You're sleazy.
So sleazy in composites as a really good thing, and it's also a really bad thing. It's really good when you're dealing with complicated shapes to have sleaze in your material. And sleaze in the material means that it will, so this is drape, it'll drape and it'll form over something. Sleaze is something where it will sort of twist and pull and go around corners. The sleaze in a dry fibre is quite handy. When you're dealing with prepregs, particularly collimated tapes, that sleaze is almost non-existent, and it becomes an absolute nightmare when you're having to deal with complicated geometries. We do have a bunch of tricks to make the material sleaze. We use heat guns to warm it all up, get the resin to flow a little bit and soften things, but it gets quite messy quite fast, as you can imagine.
You also have to store it.
You also have to store it, yes. You have to keep it frozen at minus 18 degrees Celsius for long-term storage. Long-term storage is only 12 months if you're lucky. Short-term storage at 0 degrees Celsius is usually around a month or two, and out in the open air is only a week or so. So storage is quite a nightmare with Prepreg as well.
You done? Yeah.